This final video for our absolute and relative change practice will focus on absolute and relative difference. So remember, the general formula for these is pretty much the same as our absolute and relative change. The difference is what we're comparing. When we were looking at absolute and relative change, we're looking sort of at the same thing and how it changed over time. Versus an absolute and relative difference, we are comparing two different things and sort of saying how is one more than or less than the other. Now, due to that, order and setup really comes into play here. So when we talk about the formula for absolute difference, you're going to see something sort of the compared value minus the standard. And so the standard matters. And typically you're going to be told what the standard value should be. Now, if you're not specifically told, then you should assume that it's something like the national average or something else like that. And that's sort of the value you're comparing it to. Otherwise, often I'm going to tell you, or the problem's going to tell you, this is what I want you to compare the other object to. And so that's going to get me my absolute difference. The relative difference then, just like with our relative change, is that absolute difference. And then we're going to divide that by our standard and then turn that into a percent. I'm going to do out all the work for number 9, and I'm going to talk about the answer for number 10, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about 11 because 11 is a little different. So on 9 and 10, they're both very similar. You're given sort of two sets of information. So in this, we have Amazon's revenue is 386 million in 2020, and Walmart's revenue was 524 million. Now, notice both of these revenues are in the same year for different stores. So we want to compare one store's revenue to another store's revenue. And so we're told we're going to make Amazon the sort of standard we're comparing it to. So we basically want to know how much more or less Walmart's revenue is compared to Amazon. So we're saying, so if I want to set up that absolute difference, I'm going to take whatever I'm comparing, so the Walmart value, the 524, and I'm going to subtract the Amazon's 386 million from that. So 524 minus 386. Oops, it helps if I type it right. And I would get 138. Now notice, I don't put increase or decrease here because it's not like the Amazon revenue increased to the Walmart revenue. No, instead it's Walmart's revenue is $138 million more than Amazon's revenue. If we had made Walmart the standard instead of Amazon, we'd actually get a negative number because Amazon's revenue is $138 million less than Walmart's revenue. So order matters and what the standard is matters. Okay, so we have our absolute. Now, if we want to create our relative difference, we would take that 138 million and we divide it by whatever we're making the standard. So in this case, it's that Amazon 386. And I'm going to turn that into a percent. So divided by 386. And I'm going to times that by 100. And so I get 35.8%. And so with these problems, we don't just come up with these values and add a little phrase after it. We like to describe our answers in a sentence because that way we sort of have that, what are we comparing to what? And so in this particular sentence, I would say something like, okay, the value I'm comparing. So Walmart's revenue in 2020 was, and I would say 138 million or 35.8%. So I have both my absolute and my relative more than because we're comparing. And so we want to say, like, is it more than or less than Amazon's revenue? Now, before you're like, does it matter which order I put Amazon or Walmart in? Could I just say Amazon's revenue was, 35.8% less than Walmart's revenue? No, I can't. Because if I had switched what the standard was, I would actually get a totally different percent change. So just to sort of give you a sense, yes, it would only be a negative 100 and negative 38 would now be my absolute. But if I had made Walmart my standard, I would actually find that Amazon's revenue was 26.3% less than Walmart's revenue. When we're dealing with those sort of decay rates, as we sort of think of them in math, it changes. So we have to be careful. Order matters. So sort of in your head, the order of the sentence really does matter how we're setting it up. All right, if you want to see my specific work for number 10, check out the written key on Canvas. Generally, it should have come out that the median age for first marriage for the US man was 1.8 years or 6.5% more than the median age for US women. All right, I want to talk a little bit about the setup on 11 because in this particular one, according to a Gas Buddy report in 2017, the average for regular unleaded gas in Phoenix was $2.33 per gallon. In absolute and relative terms, the price of gas at the lowest, or compare in absolute and relative terms, the price at the lowest gas station in the Phoenix metropolitan area, which was $2.15 per gallon on the same day as that report. So notice we're given an average. And so when we're given that sort of average value, we're going to use that as our standard and we're going to compare it to that 215. So when we set that work then for our absolute change, I'll go back to pink again, you're going to find that we have 215 minus 233. And yes, I am going to get a negative number from this, and I should. So because the lowest gas station was lower than that average. And so we get negative 18 cents per gallon. And then if we focus on our relative, that's relative difference. Sorry about that. That should be a difference over here, AD, not. I would take that negative 18 cents and I would divide it by that average gas cost, which is $2.33. So divided by 233. And I'll times that by 100 to get my percent, and I find that negative 7.7%. So when I'm writing this one up in a sentence, and I just sort of want you to see it with some negative values here, I would have, okay, the cost at the cost of a gallon of gas at the lowest gas station in Phoenix was 18 cents per gallon or 7.7% less than, and it's going to give me some issues because I'm so low on the screen, less than the average price of gas in Phoenix. So notice I didn't put the negative with my numbers because I'm using that word less than in there. I don't need to. And so since I have the word less than, I really shouldn't have negatives with my values. I would write them in the sentence as positive. And, keep that in mind. And the sentence is a big part of this. Remember, we sort of talked about that structure and that framework with our sentence. And just in case you forgot, I'm just going to review it really quick here. And I'm going to put a note in number 10. We sort of say it's the compared value, whatever it is. And then we write our absolute difference or our relative difference as a percent is, and then we say either more or less, I don't know which one it is, than the standard value. And so that's the sentence structure we would want to use every time, and it needs to go in that order. So this should definitely be written down somewhere in your notes before, to refer back to as you work through these problems. Hopefully we're feeling good about absolute and relative changes and differences. And that's it.